Fundamental part of the mitzvah of tzitzis is the fact that there are supposed to be two colors in the strings. There's the lovan, the white strings, and the tchelis. The truth is tchelis, in fact, is something very unique. As Rab Meir gives his famous statement, it's brought a couple times in Gemara, that tchelis is similar color to the water, the yam. The yam is a similar color to the rakia, to the sky, and the rakia is similar to the kisei hakavod, to God's share of glory, and therefore the tchelis reminds you of the Eibishter's kisei hakavod, more than the lavan, more than the lavan. In Gemara Menachos, there's a machlekes in the Tanoim. What if you don't have tchelis? You don't have the color for tchelis. Is it a big deal? Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi says, yeah. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi says that tchelis is ma'akev v'salavan. If you don't have the right dye to make the tchelis color, then even the white strings you can't be yotzei. The Chachamim disagree. And the halacha follows the Chachamim. But it's a machlekes Tanoim. Luckily, the halacha follows the Chachamim that even if someone doesn't have tchelis, they can be yotzei with the white strings as well. Fine, that's what everybody knows. It seems like in the Mishnayos they still had tchelis. It seems like in the Gemara as well. The Gemara in Menachos has stories of people having tchelis. And the shaila is, we know today we don't really have tchelis. Most Jewish people don't have any blue coloring on their tzitzis. And the shaila is, when did that stop? Why did it stop? How did it stop? In the Gemara it says that there were Amoraim that had access to correct tchelis. Yet if you look in the Medrash Tanchuma in this week's parsha, the Medrash Tanchuma says that the tchelis was nignaz. The Medrash Tanchuma says that tchelis was hidden. Now the Medrash Tanchuma officially goes back, it goes back perhaps even earlier than the times of the Gemara. So it's quite interesting that in the Gemara it seems like they still had tchelis, and yet the Medrash Tanchuma says tchelis is gone, it was nignaz. It has been hidden.
Does the Medrash Tanchuma say when it was hidden?
No. So many speculate that although the parts of the Tanchuma go back before the Gemara, but the Tanchuma wasn't sealed until after the Gemara was sealed. Perhaps a couple hundred years. Some guesstimate about 300 years after the Gemara, the Tanchuma was sealed. And therefore certain things were added to the Tanchuma that perhaps were not the case when the Gemara was sealed. Things changed over those couple hundred years. And one of them may be the tchelis. When the Medrash Tanchuma says that tchelis was nignaz, it could be that was something added at the end before the Medrash was sealed, which was a couple hundred years after the Gemara, and therefore it's not a shayla. In the times of the Gemara they still had it, or some people had it, but even that disappeared over time. And but it's interesting that in the Medrash Tanchuma, which officially comes before the Gemara, it does say that the tchelis was nignaz. Nignaz l'chayra means it's hidden forever. Like the Gemara in Yuma says about the artifacts of the first Beis Hamikdash. They were nignazu. The Aron, the Gemara in Yuma brings a debate. What happened, let's say, to the Aron? Was it captured by the forces of Bavel, by Nebuchadnezzar, or King Yoshiyahu, a number of decades before the Churban, hid it underground? And that's the more accepted opinion, if we could say so. And many things were hidden. The staff of Aaron, according to many, the staff of Moshe, if there were two different sticks, the Tzinsenes Hamon, the flask of Mon, etc., etc. And once it's been hidden forever. There were those that wanted to search for the Aron a number of decades ago, and when it came to the Rebbe's attention, the Rebbe said it's not a good idea. So they called off the search. Why did the Rebbe say that? You can imagine either way, whether they find it or whether they don't. If they don't find it, you see, we searched, we couldn't find it, So that's no good. And what if they do find it? What then? We have in Nach that the Oren is Pashut, it's a ticking time bomb, it's dangerous. What are we going to do with it? So either way, it's not, it's a venture of curiosity, but not of wisdom. It doesn't really make sense. It doesn't really make sense to do it. So all the things that were nignazu, have been nignaz forever. And
the Aaron that you say is the one that was by Uzzah for a certain time. That's the Aaron.
You see how dangerous it is, yeah. He died. He died because he wanted to protect it, that it shouldn't fall off the wagon.
Touch it, right? That's why
He
they
tried to.
only stay like 20,000. Then the rest of the Shvatim, because Aaron had mechaleb b'hem. They died a lot of them. That's the same Aaron.
Right. Yeah. Well, okay, but traditionally there's two Aronos. But let's. That's a big discussion about that. So Al Kolponim, you would assume that once the Medrash Tanchuma says that Tchelis is nignaz, finished, it's over with, there's no more Tchelis anymore. And that's taka how it was for many years. For hundreds and hundreds of years, nobody wore Tchelis. Until in the 1800s, there was a great Chassidic Rebbe from the Ishbitzer dynasty. The first Ishbitzer Rebbe, Reb Mordechai Yosef Leiner, he was already a student of Reb Simcha Bunim of Pshischa. And Reb Simcha Bunim said beautiful things about this Rabbi Leiner. Later, after Reb Simcha Bunim passed on in the Kotzker, Reb Mendel of Kotz became a great Rebbe. So one of his great students was this Reb Mordechai Leiner. At some point, Reb Mordechai Leiner broke away from the Kotzker. Now, it's not so unusual by Chassidic Rebbes. In fact, the Chayz of Lublin did it to the Elimelech of Lezhensk. He was a student and he broke away. He went to Lublin while his Rebbe was alive. And then it happened to the Chayz as well. He had a student, Rabbi Yaakov Yitzchak, the Yid HaKadosh, the holy Jew. He broke away from his Rebbe, the Chayz, and he went to Pshischa. And then he was succeeded by Reb Simcha Bunim. So it happens again a couple years later by the Kotzker. Now, by the Kotzker was more justified, if we could say so, because the Kotzker spent the last 20 years of his life pretty much in seclusion. A story that triggered it, there was a very wealthy woman named Tomodul, famous Tomodul of Poland, and she went to Kotsk. She walked into the Beis Medrash with a big suitcase full of cash. And she tells Mendel of Kotsk, you have so many young Galites sitting here and learning, and how they're supporting themselves. So here there's, X amount of cash, everyone should come, fill up their hands, and, they won't have to worry for a couple months. So the Kotzker announced, no, whoever wants, come and take. Nobody moved. They were afraid. After a couple moments, one guy takes the leap and he takes some money. And then everybody went, and they all took. And the Kotzker screamed, this is what I taught you? After sitting here with me, what I taught you? The moment you have a chance for money, you go running and grab. And he was so upset, he went to his room and he pretty much never came out.
Wow.
20 years. His son-in-law, the Avnei Nezer, was allowed to go in, and some of his students, the Chidush Yarim, etc. And then occasionally people saw him, but he was pretty much secluded. And because of that, his student, Reb Mordechai Leiner, opened up a new branch of Chassidus. Ishbitz Chassidus, the Ishbitzer he was known as, a great Rebbe, a great scholar and everything. But his Chassidus has a lot of interesting ideas. And he got lots of flack. We mentioned actually last week, we had a shir here, about Aveira Lishma, doing Aveiras Lishma. When is it justified to do something wrong because the ends justify the means, right? And we discussed, it came up all about being a Nazir. Is a Nazir a good thing, not a good thing? And we said the Ishbitzer explains the story of Zimri going with Cosby. Zimri was a complete tzaddik, and therefore the desire that he had to Cosby wasn't his own. He realized it came from the Eibishter. And when a tzaddik knows the taiva isn't his, because he's pure, then it's a message from God to go ahead and do the Aveira. And it was an Aveira Lishma, because he wanted to suck out sparks of Kedusha from her, etc. And the Ishbitzer says, but Pinchas didn't realize, Pinchas wasn't Masik, and therefore he went and he killed him. And we said the Briskers, The Brisker said back that the Ishbitzer says that Pinchas didn't get what was going on with Zimri. But the truth is the Ishbitzer didn't get what was going on with Pinchas. So the Ishbitzer got lots of flack for that. But otherwise he was a great Chassidic Rebbe, lots of interesting ideas. And he actually passed away before the Kotzker. He passed away before his Rebbe. And many of his students wanted to go back to Kotzk. And Kotzker, Mitamal, you want to come back? In fact, Rabbi Leibel Eger, Rabbi Kiva Eger's grandson, was one of those. He had gone to Ishbitz, but after the Ishbitz had passed away, they wanted to come back to Kotzk. And Kotzk, traitors. Now you want to come back? You can't come back. So then the Ishbitz's son became a Rebbe, known as Rabbi Yaakov Leiner. He wrote the Beis Yaakov. And then he had a son, Gershon Chanoich Henech Leiner. And he's the star of today's shir, the grandson of the Ishbitzer. He's born in the year 1839. He lives about 50 years, passes away in 1890. So he was alive during the, a little bit of the Tzemach Tzedek, but the Reb Marash's times. And in the year 1887, shortly before he passed away, he became enthralled with the idea of Tchelis, and he said he thinks we can bring it back. And he wrote a sefer called Sefune Tmunei Choil, and in it he describes how he believes he found the correct Chilazon, which is where the Tchelis dye comes from, and we're going to see all about this in just a moment. Look at number one. What exactly is the Chilazon? So, Tchelis comes up a number of times in Chumash. It comes up in this week's parasha by Tzitzis, but it comes up already in Teruma. When it comes to donating to the Mishkan, they use Tchelis. And both Tchelises have to come from the same source. What color actually is Tchelis? It's not so pashut. We usually think it's dark blue. Rashi, both in Teruma, Rashi again in this week's parsha, both times he says Tchelis is Yorek. Yorek is usually green. Sometimes Yorek can be a little bit yellow, like we have gold, Zohav Yorek, refers to yellow gold. But Rashi says that the blood, the Chilazon creature, we'll have to see what it is, gives off a blood or a liquid which is Yorek. And Yorek is green. So many Chumashim translate it as turquoise. Turquoise is like aqua. Not exactly, but that idea, a mixture between blue and green. And even within turquoise you have two types, the bluer shade, the shade which is more blue, the shade which is more green. But Rashi writes, both in Truma and in this week's parsha, it's Yorek. It's Yorek. Very strange. When you learn Rab Meir's statement that the Tchelis is like the water and the water is like the sky and the sky is like the Kisei HaKavod, you always think blue. The Pasuk says in Parshas Mishpatim that under the Eibish's feet is Livnas HaSapir, a sapphire, dark blue. There are different colors sapphire, but usually we think of classic sapphire as dark blue. Definitely the sky doesn't have a green tinge to it. The water may. The water sometimes has a green tinge to it. But you wouldn't expect Rashi to write in both places Yorek, but he does. Some believe Tchelis is a little more purpley, actually. A little more purpley. The problem is Argoman is purple, and you see by the Mishkan it's two different colors. It's Tchelis and it's Argoman. So some want to say that, it's different shades of purple. Tchelis is bluish purple. So you have those that want to say it's bluish purple, those that want to say it's dark blue, and then you have Rashi saying it's Yorek. And Ibn Ezra brings opinion that it's Yorek, a greenish blue. So Bechlal, what color Tchelis is not so clear off the bat. But we know that Tchelis has to come from the liquid of the Chilazon. How do we know that? It's a Gemara in Menachos in number 1. Tan Rabbanan, we learned in the Braise, Chilazon, you know what this Chilazon is? Zehu gufoi doim layam. The body looks like the water. That means the body of the Chilazon looks similar to the water, a similar bluish greenish color. Ubriyasoi doim ladag. it looks like a fish. You know, if it looks like a fish, and is it a fish? It looks like a fish. Va'oile echad l'shivim shana. It ascends once in 70 years. Ubedomai tzayvin tchelis, and it's with its blood that we use to color tchelis. Lefichach, therefore, dom of yikarim, it's very expensive. Now, if you learn this brayse, it seems like that this is the only way to make tchelis. There is no other way to make tchelis besides the blood of the chilazon. In fact, if you look in the Tosefta on Menachos, the Tosefta has a one line, it's not on the paper, where it says clearly the one and only way to make tchelis is with the chilazon, and that's it. And that's it.
It's a land creature.
So we're going to see there's many opinions. Some hold it's a Rashi in one place says it's a snail, one place says a worm, one place says a fish. So we don't even know what the chilazon is. The Brisa says it's briosei doim eladag. It looks like a fish. If it's a fish, to say it's a fish. No, it's doim eladag. So we don't know exactly what color is tchelis, and we don't know exactly what the chilazon is. But look at number 2. Right. It goes up once in 70 years. Now, what does that mean?
From the bottom?
Wherever it
So Rashi learns that it goes from the water to land once in 70 years. We're going to learn the once in 70 years just means that's when there's like a swarm, so many of them. But it's always available if you search for it. That's what we're going to see. Bakapanim, look at number 2. Number 2 is also Gemara Menachos. Amalei Abaya l'Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yehuda. Hai techilta. This techelis. Heichit savisola. How do we color the techelis? Because number 1 was a brisa. Number 2 was already later. These are the Amoraim. How do we make techelis? So Amalei, he says, my sinon, we bring dam chilazon, the blood of the chilazon. Now, by the way, whatever the chilazon is, when we say we use the blood, it's not its life blood. It has secretion that it actually it spells out when it's attacked, either to send off the attacker. Some believe it's a squid, or some of these squids, what they do is when they excrete this liquid, it looks like the fish, and therefore it acts as a decoy. That the predator should go after this. The liquid is almost like an image of itself in order to act as a decoy, so the fish should be able to escape. Either way, the Gemara doesn't say clearly. The Gemara said it's the blood of the chilazon, but Rabbeinu Tam, quoted in the Tosfos in Masechta Shabbos, says that the blood is not its lifeblood. It's mifkad pavkid. It has like a collection. It's sitting inside. It has a storehouse of this liquid, and that's what you use. Now, says the Gemara, v'samonin, you also bring spices. V'raminon luhu b'yoyre, you throw the spices in a pot, u'matarchinon le, and you boil it. Now, it sounds like you have to boil the blood with spices. Now, here's another crucial machlekes between the Rishonim. Crucial. Is it really a mix? It's the blood plus spices? So then what gives it its true color? Does the spices enhance the color of the chilazon, of the dam? So there's a big debate between Rashi and Tosfos over here, the Rambam as well. Rashi says the spices are only to boil the wool, to maybe soften the wool, that the wool should better absorb the blood of the chilazon. But the color is completely from the chilazon. Tosfos says no, the color comes from both. That's very important, obviously, if you're trying to identify what the chilazon is. Does the chilazon itself need to give off the perfect color of tchelis? According to Rashi, it does. Rashi holds the spices are only to soften. You boil the wool in the spices. So or the linen, or whatever the material you're using, in order that the strings should be able to absorb the color. Tosfos says no. The spices itself is part of the coloring process. That's a crucial debate. Now says the Gemara, v'shaklina, we take purta, we take some of this mixture, bebeyasa, in an egg. You put some in an egg, v'taminon luhu bu'udra. You put a little bit of material inside to soak it up, to test it. Whatever you use for testing cannot be used for the mitzvah, because it has to be colored lishma. you have to color it for the sake of tzitzis. Here you're coloring it for the sake of your lab, you're testing in your laboratory. So you take a little test, v'shadinon le lahu beyasa, which l'chora means that the rest of the stuff in the egg you pour out, because maybe the whole thing is considered a trial experiment, so you don't use it. V'kalinon le lahudra, and you burn that material that was used to absorb because it was a trial and it wasn't done lishma. That's what the Gemara says. That's what the Gemara says. Do we have any idea what the Chilazon is? Not yet. We know how to make it, if you would find it, but even then we came into a major crossroad between Rashi and Tosfos. What do you do with the spices? Are the spices just to prepare the wool, or are the spices actually... It has to obviously be wool. When it comes to tchelis, the material has to be wool. Or are the spices actually part of the coloring? Fine. So the question is, in the late 1800s, the year was 1887, Reb Gershon Chanoi Chenach Leiner. He believes, based on what the Gemara says about the Chilazon, he thinks he found it. He narrowed it down to a type of squid, the cuttlefish, and there's many species amongst that, and there was one specific one which he felt ticked off all of the criteria of the Gemara. And he actually got some of them imported from the Mediterranean Sea to the city of Radzin. He's known as the Radziner Rebbe. And he was a very colorful person. Besides the fact he liked the color of tchelis, he was a colorful person. In fact, here's a great story. They say he once went to the Vatican. He wanted to see the Parechas. They wouldn't let him in. But there were a couple of grandmaster chess players sitting outside. And he told two of the grandmasters that I'll play two of you simultaneously. And at the same time, and if I win one of you, then you guys get me entrance into the Vatican. So they agreed. The legend goes like this. You'll see if you believe that this happened. With one of the players, the master played white, and in the other game, the Radziner played white. So in the first game, he sees the grandmaster moves the horse. So he goes to the other game, he moves his horse. Then black responds. He goes back to the first game, he moves black. He played two identical games, he has to win one of them. The games are going to be identical, and one of them is white, one is black. He has to win one. And that's Taka what happened. He won one of the games. This is the story they say, and he got himself in to see the Parechas. Interesting.
And really saw the prophet, is that?
That's the tradition. I don't know. He wanted to see the Parechas. It sounds like some say he actually saw it. I don't know. I wasn't there. He used to carry a gun with him. He used to walk around with a gun. Very uncommon for Chassidish Rebbe. Yeah. In fact, when his father, the Beis Yankov, passed away in some city, the Radziner went to bury his father, but in the regular Beis HaKvaros, the Beis HaKvaros was accused of stealing land from the surrounding Goyish houses. And every time someone else died, somehow the Beis HaKvaros got bigger. They were taking land from the Goyim, and the Radziner wasn't happy. So he bought a new piece of land to bury his father. And the Chevra Kadisha wanted to stop him. He took out his gun, shot a few bullets in the air, and the Chevra Kadisha fled. Listen, who knows? These are stories they say about the guy.
Amendment.
But he was definitely a genius. There's no question about that. He wrote a sefer called Sidrei Taurus, which got him in big trouble. Sidrei Taurus, he took many Masechtas of Mishnayos from Taurus, and he wrote his own Gemara, based on everything he found in Bavli and Yerushalmi. He made his own Gemara around the Mishnayos. It was a brilliant work, and it was such a good work that the Bezdin of Vilna put the work in Chedim. The Bezdin of Vilna put the work of the Radziner in Chedim, because they said it looks so much like a Gemara, people are going to think it's a real Gemara. And what's worse is that when they find out you made it, you know what they're going to say? That so to the rest of Shas was also made 50 years ago. Somebody made it up, right? So it's dangerous. The Oinig Yom Tov, big Achronim put the work in Chedim. So the Radzin is looking for support. He got support. Rabbi Yeshua Lev of Kutna, one of the great Gaonim in the 1800s, Chassidic related, he said, I don't know what people want from the guy. Well, he did a beautiful work over here. If someone does, the better the work, the more chayrim the work is in. It was a great work. There's no reason to put it in chayrim. And but it was a big mice at the time. It was a big issue. So apparently the next version, the Radziner would write on the top of each page that this is not a Gemara, this is not a Gemara, this is not a Gemara, in order nobody should make that mistake. I'll just tell you another legend they say, just because the Radziner, which used to carry around a gun. This is a legend, they say, that somebody came to his Beis Medrash.
How many years ago?
He passes away in 1890. In the 1800s it was. Someone comes to his Beis Medrash, a thief, a bandit, and storms into his room with a gun. He says, Rebbe, give me everything that you got.
Rebbe?
He says, well, he's going to do it with respect, right? Gan vafumascharte, rachmonakar. You still refer to God. The Rebbe says. So the Rebbe says, okay, I have money in the drawer here, but I can't give it to you while you're pointing the gun at me. Lower the gun, and then I'll give you. So the guy lowers the gun. The Radzina opens his drawer, and he takes out his gun. He pointed to the guy scrammed and never came back. Who knows? Oder yeah, oder nicht. Anyhow, he was a very colorful Rebbe, mamish, a brilliant mind, and he was infatuated with the Tchelis. So he was in Radzin in Poland. Radzin is near Lublin, mamish, middle of Poland. And he wants to go to the Mediterranean. It's a big trip. So at this point, he hasn't made it there yet, but he gets this squid, this cuttlefish, he gets it from the Mediterranean, imported to Poland. Now you can imagine by the time it came to Poland, so it's a good geschmeckt. No, it didn't come in in a bag with water. Exactly. No, it was dead. Anyhow, when it came to Radzin, so he went to he went to scientists to try and get the excretion. They did, but the color was too dark. It was blackish. It was black, too black. And the Radzina wasn't happy. Radzina said, I still think I'm right. It says after the fish is dead for a week, so then the color is black. But if you get it while it's alive and you excrete it, you could get a blue. So he himself he traveled to Italy, to Naples, and which is on the water. And in the 1880s, there was apparently a big aquarium there, and people would travel to Naples specifically to see the beautiful marine life of the Mediterranean. And while he was there, he got hold of the thing he was looking for. And in Naples, he got some people to work on it, to excrete the liquids, and he got the color he was looking for. And bingo! He was so excited. And he writes that it didn't take long until he was getting thousands of letters. People were asking him for the tchelis. And he actually records in one place, I already have 12,000 people walking around wearing tchelis on their tzitzis. And he was very excited.
Viral.
He was very excited. Mamish went viral.
Chami was happy with that.
So that's what we're going to see. That's what we're going to see. So, first, wait a second. The Medrash Tanchuma says it was Nignaz. The Medrash Tanchuma is Nignaz. It was Nignaz like the Gemara in Yuma says about the Oren and the Tzintzenes Haman and everything. And no one's ever gone looking for that, right? There was one Jew that went looking for the lost ark, right? But you,
Harrison Ford.
Exactly, a Yid. Nicht kein Yid is a Yid. His mother's a Yid is a Yid. But like we said, the Rebbe discouraged people from doing it. The shaila is when the Medrash says it's nignaz l'chor, it means it's over with. It's over with. The Rambam in his commentary on Mishnayos and Masechta Menachos, the Rambam writes black and white, we no longer have the color of Tchelis. He doesn't mention any Chilazon business, but the Rambam just says, we no longer have the color. It's EF Shalasoi, so you can't make it. It's gone. Finished. The Arizal in the Pri-Eitz Chaim, the Chaim Vital writes from the Arizal that since the Churban, we don't have potential to put on, we don't have koyach to put on tchelis. Apparently the is very powerful. The Tzemach Tzedek in Derech Mitzvah Secha, he says, Lavan is the chesed of Hashem, tchelis is gvura. Maybe that helps to explain the Arizal, maybe yeah, maybe not. But the Arizal says that ein lonu koyach, we don't have the strength to wear tchelis since the Churban. Which is funny, because the Gemara speaks about Amoraim having tchelis hundreds of years after the Churban. So you must say that Arizal would say, well, it wasn't it wasn't prevalent. It wasn't widespread. Maybe a couple people still had it. They yarshened it, It didn't disappear. Maybe the Chilazon disappeared, but if you had actual tzitzis with Chelis and it was passed down, so maybe a couple people had it. But Arizal says since the Churban it's gone. By the way, Rabbi Yoel of Satmar said, what's the pshat in the Arizal? Because the Gemara in end of Bracha says that since the Churban, the sky is no longer in its pure, rich color. The Gemara says in Brachas that from the day of the Churban, the Rikiya is not B'tar so it doesn't have its pure color. So it says Rabbi Yoel of Satmar, what was Rabbi Meir's word? Tchelis reminds you of the water, reminds you of the sky, Kisya covered. But once the sky is off color, the whole thing is off, and therefore Tchelis is no longer going to remind you of the God's throne of glory. And that's why the Arizal says, since the Churban, it's no longer extant. Based on the Gemara and Brachas, that the sky is no longer in its original color. All right, a cute word. It's not a halachic, it's a cute idea. But the Rambam says it's gone. The Arizal says, Ein bono koyach, it's like finished. Since the Churban, it's over. And the Medrash Tanchuma says it's nignaz. So and Taka, for hundreds of years, nobody wore it. It's like, what made the Radzina, we said he was a colorful man, a very smart man, fine. But why didn't he think for a second that if it's Taka sitting there in the Mediterranean, how come no one got it before? In fact, this was one of the tiniest many Achronim at the time had to the Radziner. If you're right, where were all the Rishonim until now? It was right over here, it was right here, it was in front of everyone's face. Many people lived in Italy. How come no one looks for it? Apparently, it's not around until Mashiach comes, like the Arizal said. So, I'm here to tell you it's not so pashut. This is a tshuva the Radvaz in number 4. A very important tshuva the Radvaz.
How many years ago?
The Radvaz, he was in the 1500s. Passes away 1590 le'erech. Number 4. Sha'al, someone asked the Radvaz. We say in Masechta Shabbos that when the Yidden were in the Midbar, they were capturing a Chilazon, because the Gemara says, where did they tie and untie things in the Mishkan that were not allowed to do it on Shabbos? Everything you can do on Shabbos, they did in the Mishkan. Where in the Mishkan were they tying and untying? Says the Gemara, what do you mean? They had to capture Chilazon. Koishin, they would tie Matir and Hareshtas, untie the traps, lots of Oisai to hunt it. And this guy asked the Radvaz, how could they, in the Midbar they had a Chilazon that they could tzayder, they could trap? The Gemara in Megillah Davav Moral says black on white that in the Chelik of Zvulun is where you find Chilazon. It's in Eretz Yisrael. Right, exactly. And so how when the Yidden were in the desert, when they were building the Mishkan, they got their hands on Chilazon.
How does it become a cuttlefish then?
It's not in Italy.
It's not even in water.
No, Zvulun had water in his area. Where's
Zvulun?
The Chayf Yamim Mishkan.
On the Mediterranean.
Yeah, on the Mediterranean. The Zohar holds it's also in the Kinneret. The Zohar said it's in the Kinneret you could find. It has to do with the well of Miriam.
Shave it on the water, on the Mediterranean.
Right, but in that area of the Mediterranean, you'll find Chilazon. It sounds like nowhere else.
Not in the Midbar.
Definitely not in the Midbar. The Chiev Shorhaya to come to Eretz Yisrael at Tzadai. Whether the Yidden, are you going to say when the Yidden were in the desert, they sent a few people. The Alter Rebbe thinks that a tradition that Moshe Rabbeinu sent people to Italy to get a sreigim. That Moshe Rabbeinu sent people to Italy to get a sreigim while they were in the desert.
Calabria?
So maybe Taka, Moshe Rabbeinu sent, maybe Moshe sent people to go to the Mediterranean and get the Chilazon. Anyhow, the person asking the Radvaz obviously thought that wasn't reasonable. Do you think they went to Eretz Yisrael? So Tshuva, the Radvaz says the question's not a question. There's Chilazon everywhere, just not so many. By Zvulun, there's a lot. This is not a serious question. The Chilazon's in the Mediterranean. They would. There was like a migration of them. I guess that every 70 years there was a migration. This could be besides for the 70 years. In Zvulun, they would show up on the sand. They didn't have to trap it. It was way there for the taking. After the Yidden were exiled, it no longer would arise on its own. But we know Nebuzaradan, who destroyed the first Beis HaMikdash, he was the chief butcher of Nebuchadnezzar. He left in Israel Medala Sa'am from the paupers of the nation, L'Karmim, to work the vineyards, Ula Oigvim. And what is it? V'Amar Azal, these are Tzadik Chilazon. Mashma that they needed to hunt it. When the Yidden were in Eretz Yisrael, in the area of Zvulun, there was perhaps something supernatural. The Chilazon would just show itself on the beach. After Golus, no longer did that happen. You had to go hunt. Once you're hunting, you can go anywhere in the Mediterranean. V'chein b'maisa ha-mishkan, so too when they made the Mishkan. Ha-yismuchim liyam ha-kadmoini Yamsuf. When they made the Mishkan, they were near the Yamsuf. Shari ein ben Yamsuf l'Har Sinai l'Dover Mu'at. It's a very small amount of distance between the Har Sinai and the Yamsuf. Hitain is in the Yamsuf. There's also Chilazon. Ha-yochim the Yamsuf. V'tzadin oisa, they had to catch it. In Zvulun, there was something else. It would arise on its own. Shainim, it was there. Like we say by the Tachash. By the Tachash, we say it was the Tachash was a special animal that appeared once historically for the Yidden in the Mishkan. But we don't say the same miracle by the Chilazon, because Matzah, it's a natural thing which always was around. The Efsher, the Radvad says this in the 1500s in Egypt. The end of his life, he lived in Sfas. Ad hayoymu matzah, it could be it's even there today. El she'ein makirinos, we don't know what it is. Or ein yoymu, we don't know how to trap it. Gam, in addition, einam tzrichlan, we don't need it. Besides for tzitzis, you don't need chelis, because chilazon. Because if you want that color, you can extract that type of beautiful blue, purple, green color from many other sources. Shetzeva adoyim el chelis matzah harbe, you can find the color anywhere. The Haino Istis Hanikra Ba'arvi Nil, whatever that color is, and you can use the other sources in a professional way, she'ena over, that will not disappear from the fabric, even after gius, even after ironing or whatever process you'll do to the material. It's a permanent coloring. In other words, you want a dark blue, or you get it other ways. So there's no emergency for the, no goyim are looking for the chilazon, right? That's for the. But the Radvaz says it could be it's around even today. Fascinating. The Tanchuma said it's Nignaz. Some Meforshim on the Tanchuma say Nignaz means it was forgotten. When the Tanchuma says it's Nignaz been hidden, it means the knowledge has been hidden, not the item, the knowledge. The Eitz Yosef, big Meforshim and the Medrash say the Medrash never meant that literally that's Nignaz. The knowledge, we no longer have access to it because it's a problem in us. But if somebody would come and somehow figure it out, it's there for the waiting. The Arizal says, Api Kabbalah, we don't have koyach to do it. So the shaila is, if you have a mitzvah in Torah, if the Eibishter says we're tchelis and it's right in front of you, but the Arizal says these days we don't have koyach to do it, that's not a halachic reason. The Poskim really wouldn't. It's not like the Arizal said don't do it. It sounds like the Arizal is commenting on the Metzias. The fact that Chelis isn't around is because Ruchnistic we don't have the koyach to do it. But if it would be in front of you, you would fall back to the rules of halacha where you can't shirk off a mitzvah. And many say that the Arizal would agree. The Arizal just commenting on the fact that in his time no one had it, and Kabbalistically it's because the light is too great, and now that there's no more Beis HaMikdash, we can't hack it, we can't handle it. But in theory, if it would return,
isn't Chelis a color?
But yeah, it has to come from the Chilazon.
Where do you get that from? How do you know that? According to what the
we saw number. No, we saw number one. No, no. Right. No. The Radvat is talking about B'chlal by Goyim. Anyone.
But why does it have to be from the Chilazon?
Because that's
that's how they got
it. No. That's what we saw.
Now
that's
you get it anyway.
Because that's the tradition. That's the Yiddish. Saying that Hashem tell Moshe and Har Sinai.
No, in other words, then you have to.
The Taisa. No, I mentioned in the beginning.
He said it comes from anywhere. So
not Chelis for tzitzis.
But why not?
He's saying on the market you're not going to find Chilazon. That's what God told Moses.
It says Chelis. It doesn't say Chilazon.
That's what it says in the written law. But there's Torah Shabbat Peh.
You can make Chelis from the Chilazon
or from somewhere else.
It says you can make Chelis from another.
Right, but it doesn't count.
If knows which.
The Gemara's right. The Gemara says in Baba Metzia that Hashem tells Yidden there's something called Kala Ilon, which is a plant, which makes an almost identical color. It's indiscernible. You can't tell the difference. And the Gemara said that the Eibishter warns if anyone walks around with the false color and makes believe. Right. So the Tosefta says in Masechta Menachos, the one and only way is Chilazon.
That's the color. It's getting
where
it
it
from
came
the
from,
Chilazon.
It's the color from the Chilazon. Right.
Right, but it's not
Exactly.
the point that it needs to be.
It has to be
Correct.
that color from the Chilazon.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
But not the color. It has to be from that source.
Correct.
Color could
But
be identical.
no, but you
No,
can,
no,
but
because there's a process. You have to get that color
Right.
from that source.
if it's going to be black, like if the
But is
Chilazon
it-
already
well, let's say
died,
it's the same exact color.
no,
Or
no.
it can't be. Or something.
No, it could be, but it doesn't count. It's almost like the same chicken.
If you
A chicken that was
computerize
shechted, a chicken that wasn't, and it's being served to you. You're going to tell the difference between the two? It's the exact same chicken. One was shechted, one isn't. That's it. So the Gemara Taka says, the Eibishter says, anyone that walks around with tcheles, which mamish fools the whole world, but it doesn't fool God. What?
Should have brought that in the source. No.
Can't bring everything. This hell.
No,
We have
that's an
enough.
important idea.
All right, but you see in number one, the already says that the tcheles has to come from the Chilazon, and that's it. That's the story. Now, so even though the Arizal is commenting on the fact that it's not extant, but if it would be in front of you, the Arizal wouldn't say don't put it on. I was saying Rabbi Yoel of Satmar says that we say in Tcheles Mordechai, beautiful. We say in the Shoshanas Yaakov, the Yidden were excited Biroisam when they saw Tcheles Mordechai. Why did the Tcheles excite the Yidden? Because the Arizal said, since the Churban there's no more Tcheles, the Tcheles will only come back with Mashiach. So when the Yidden saw Mordechai with Tcheles, they realized we're about to build the second Beis HaMikdash. So that's why Biroisam Yachat Tcheles Mordechai, the Tcheles got them very excited because they knew that it can only be with the Beis HaMikdash. What?
As well says they didn't see it from when they went into Golis. When it was Radin, they left woman.
They were still hunting it. They were still. Anyhow, fine. So Al Kaponim, though, the Radvaz says the mitzvah that the Chilazon still exists and therefore it's able to be hunted down. Okay, let's go weiter. We said though.
About what?
Rashba, no, go on. Nicht Rashbaz. Jump to number 6 for a second. At the time, the Aruch HaShulchan was alive. The Aruch HaShulchan, Rabbi Epstein, he passed away in the early 1900s. The Aruch HaShulchan at the time of this story was one of the big Rabbanim, and he writes in number 6, jump to number 6, Ubavneseinu with our sins, Mizman shenis pazarnu, since we have been scattered. Ein lanu tchelis, we don't have tchelis, and ein anu yoidim, the first letter seems to be cut. We don't know how to make it, and all of our tzitzis only has white strings. Well, mikol makom, nonetheless, we're still mekayim the mitzvah properly, because we already said we don't paskin like Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, we paskin like the Chachamim, that tchelis doesn't hold back the love. If you don't have the tchelis, you can still have the white strings, you're good to go. And therefore, if someone doesn't wear the white strings, God will punish you because it's a full-fledged mitzvah, it's available. But the tchelis is gone. But you should know, it's already a number of years that one fellow, referring to the Radziner Rebbe, these are the Misnagdim, Echad Hispoyer. There's one Chassidish guy that glorified himself, very proud, that he found the Chilazon and he made tchelis. The Himshich Achra of Eza Anoshim. He slept a couple people, 12,000. Radziner counted 12,000 at one point. Says Aruch HaShulchan, he slept a couple people. Ach loy hoya shemei migdolei ador. But the Gdolei Ador didn't give their consent, and Miklal Yisrael, he didn't take off. V'nizbatel Ador became bottle until Mashiach will come. So he says, Taka, there was a fellow. He says, Echad, doesn't say Chacham Echad, one guy. He's spoyer, not a very complimentary description of the Radziner Rebbe. He chapped a couple people, but then it already became bottle because no one agreed with him. I read number 6. They say the Maharsham, Reb Mordechai Shvadron was a great posek in that time in Europe. Apparently, he did wear the tchelis. He bought into this. Well, the Maharsham had ties to Chassidus, so it made sense that he had a soft spot. So he wore tchelis. But for the most part, like Aruch HaShulchan says, the Gedei Yisrael didn't take to it. Now, because there's a number of issues. First of all, we mentioned the Arizal says, we don't have koyach to do it. Then the Tanchuma says, Nignaz, The Rambam says we don't have it anymore. You have to kind of jump through hoops to explain that no, none of them really meant it, and if you find it, you should still use it. Okay. But we said that there's a number of other issues. First, we said there's a major debate between Rashi and Tosfos of how you make the tchelis, right? Rashi says you use the spices to soften the wool, not for the color. Tosfos says you use it for the color. Yeah. So who are you going to paskin like? Which one are you going to do? If you're going to use it for the color, Rashi's going to say it's no good. If you don't use it for the color, Tosfos will say it's no good. You know, you have to be, all of a sudden you bump into that. And you bump into another issue, which is what? How in the world could you identify the chilazon? Is it a fish? Is it a worm? Is it a snail? What is it? So look at number 3. The Noid of Yehuda has a tshuva. It's pretty straightforward. He wants to know, tefillin, there was a craze in his days to wax the tefillin with some oil from a treifa fish. And it keeps the tefillin smooth, and maybe it keeps the color on.
The ritzuos or
the ritzuos. And the problem is, everything used in items of mitzvahs have to be min hamuter b'ficha, something you're allowed to eat. So the Noid Yehuda wants to say, could be coloring is different. Maybe even the black of the ritzuos doesn't have to be kosher. Now we're machmir that it should be, but the Noid Yehuda says like this, it could say fakert. Afilu b'dover shua mitzvah, number 3, the second one, even if the mitzvah is to be colored, like the ritzuos to be black, or like the tzitzis to be blue, maybe the coloring doesn't have to be kosher. Because tchelis was in the Mishkan and in the Mikdash and in the Paroiches and in the clothes of the Kohanim. Vari tchelis is a tzeva of a dam chilazon, which is a worm. It's a toilas. Rashi in Sanhedrin daf tzadik aleph. It's a famous Rashi in Sanhedrin who says it's a worm, a toilas. The toilas is not min hamuter l'Yisrael. There's no worm which are kosher. And I feel you're allowed to color it. Alma, what do you see? A coloring doesn't have to be kosher. Im gufa dover, if the item which is the wool is kosher, enk pei de betzevesh nitzba boy, the color doesn't matter because it's rak lechazusa. It's just for imagery. Hari muchach, you see, the tzviya ein b'ma, coloring is not really substantial. So hu adinami b'hai shichol, so too blackening the ritzuos. Yeah, the ritzuos have to be black. Hashem told Moshe in Har Sinai. Even though I'm Sinai, but not ein b'tzviyas u'mamish. You don't have to be makbid midover Torah. The black could be anything. But then he says next paragraph, if the im zeh hachilazon hu min tameh. Who said the chilazon is taka treif? That's if it's a worm. Who said it's a worm? Yesh b'zeh shenuyim mysterious b'pirish Rashi. Going through Rashis, you'll find contradictions. B'mesechta menachas mem dalet, it says chilazon zeh. This is what we saw in number 1. Gufa looks like the water. Its body looks like a fish. It comes up once in 70 years. Which I said that Bechal the Radziner says once in 70 years there was like a migration of them, but there was always individuals that you could find. Ve'im kein ein raya klal mit chelis. Because Yeshloim, the chilazon is a fish. If the chilazon is a fish, maybe it has snapi v'kaskesses. Maybe it's a kosher fish. So it could be a worm, it could be a kosher fish. Ach Rashi zal mefarishon b'menachas. Rashi menachas says oila min haaretz. I think Rashi in Megillah says that when we say oila, it goes up from the water. But over here, Rashi says it goes up from the earth. It's b'chlal not a sea. V'im remes haaretz. If it's a creepy crawl, b'vada it's tamei. V'lechoyre miloshen abraisa muchach that it's a creepy crawly, because it says briyasa, it's like a fish. What do you mean it's like a fish? Say it is a fish. If it's taka from the water, what do you mean it's like a fish? If it looks like a fish, and it comes from the water, and it smells like a fish, and it tastes like a fish, it's a fish. It's a fish.
No.
Right. Well, apparently not. I don't know. Apparently sea creatures, not. The question is, does every sea creature be termed a fish? There's a Vilna Gaon, and it's not so posh. In Diktuk is right, exactly. It's not a squid, a vertebrate, right? Is it a fish or not a fish?
An enemy, go into the reef. I mean, there's all kinds of.
Right, but are they all considered dag? Is dag a generic term for anything that floats underwater, or that is underwater? V'lachin, he says, that's why Rashi learns oila min haaretz. It must be it looks like a fish, not a fish. It's a worm. Dahainu remesars or lakach ain't enough. Therefore, you can't call it a fish mamish. Mashagodo b'yabosha, because if it's a land creature, it's not under the category of fish. Lakach kamar. That's why the Brisa says it looks like a fish in its imagery. Aval ain't a dog mamish. But Rashi in Sanhedrin, Tzadik Aleph. Rashi says there it's a worm, but yotzim in ayam. So Rashi in Sanhedrin said it's a worm which comes from the water. Rashi Menachos said it's b'chal a land creature, and then you have what most people think that it's a fish. V'chein b'Masechta Megillah, this I mentioned before. Rashi says that the Chilazon goes min ayam al haaretz. When it was in Zvulun, why was it by Zvulun? Because Zvulun's on the water. V'chein kosav HaRambam. Now the Rambam says it's a dog. Hanimtze b'Yam HaMelech. The Yam HaMelech.
There's nothing in
Well, the Fiza Yesh Loim, according to the Rambam, it has snapi v'kaskeses and it's b'chal Torah. What you see from the Noib Yehuda is that we have no idea what this Chilazon is. What?
I thought nothing lives in that sea. Yam HaMelech.
When Rambam says Yam HaMelech, it means Mediterranean.
Right, yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I guess so. You must say that. Yeah. But Al Kopanim, right. What is the Chilazon? Who knows? It could be a worm. And even if it is a worm, is it a land creature? Is it a sea creature? Is it a fish? So when the Radzina wants to identify the Chilazon, it's like, how do you even know where to begin? There's such a big machlekes rishonim. What type of creature it is? And then you have the debate between Rashi and Tosfos of how you make it. And then there's another whopping debate, which is how many strings of the tzitzis have to be colored chelis? There's three opinions: Rambam, Ravid, and Rashi and Tosfos. The Rambam says 1 out of the 8. And in fact, only 1 out of the 8 strings. So even though the 8 strings are really 4, which are doubled, you take 1 of the 4 and half. 1/2 you make blue. And in fact, in Sefer Hakana, the old Kabbalistic work, Nechunya ben Hakana, or others say it's the Ramak says it's from much later, but either way, it says there also you take 1/2 of one of the strings, mamash like the Rambam.
Is it the one that goes around the rest of the koyos, or?
Rambam says you start with the white and you end with white.
Right.
I want one.
The Ravid says
One
it's
full.
the Ravid 1 full, l'chera 1 full. Yeah, two out of the 8, l'chera 1 full. So 1/4 has to be. Rashi and Tosfos say half. Half white, half blue. In other words, 4 of the strings need to be blue, 4 white. So-
It has to be quiet.
So what are you going to do? Who are you going to pass him like?
They said
How do they learn?
Who are you going to pass him like? Because so you're going to say just go like Rashi and Tosfos, the more the merrier. Not so pashut. There's a Rambam who I wanted to get on. I do actually have it. Look at number 7. The Rambam holds that the white strings have to be the same color as the garment. When we say white strings, how white do they have to be? What if my tzitzis turn orange? What if I have orange tzitzis? We say tchelis are the tchelis, and the other ones are called white. Is white mamish white, or white just means non-tchelis? What if I have orange strings? So the Rambam says, Yeshayimim, Kivon Shalom, Alter Rebbe number 7. Yeshem, some say Kivon Shalom Adnum in Atayra. Shetzorich Lasas Hatzitzis. You have to make the tzitzis min akonov. The tzitzis have to be from the same min as the corner of your garment. Im ken tzorch shigam ken tzivam. This is the Rambam that the color of the strings have to be mimin seva akonov, the color of the corner. Kagoin, for example, if the talus is red, your tzitzis should be red. If it's yeroika, if it's green, the tzitzis should be green. It needs to be that way. The Rambam. V'yesh oimrim, and most hold no. Loik pidat Torah ela al mamoshes. The Torah is only concerned about the material. That mimin mamoshes atalas. That it should be from the. Like if you have a silk garment, you can't have cotton tzitzis. You can have wool, linen, or silk. Wool and linen always work, and otherwise only the strings which are the same material as the beged. If you have a silk 4-cornered garment, you can't have cotton strings. It's only that the mamoshes, avalat seva, but the color.
Are no good for that
So
reason.
cotton tzitzis are no good because, according to many Rishonim,
It's not chayiv.
you're only chayiv min Torah if the beged is made out of wool or linen.
What about the tzitzis? Are they cotton then?
if you're wearing cotton
When you see
tzitzis,
No,
people
wool and
count-
linen. wool
you
and
can
linen
you're
always
allowed to wear woolen. If you wear cotton tzitzis, then you can have either string. The strings could be either wool or
Doesn't
cotton.
have to be min hakon.
No, wool
you
and
have
linen
that,
always work. Wool and linen always work. Wool and linen strings are like, they always work. They're like the Joker. They're like the Joker of Rami Cup. They always work. They always work.
Randall, the Alter
What?
also passes that way, about the cotton tzitzis.
Alter brings 2 days. Alter says, yes, that min Torah, it's only if you have...
Only if you have-
Yeah, but many
not
Rishonim hold it all begodim are chayiv. It's a big machlekes, and Alter brings both opinions. Alter B'Taka says better to wear woolen things, so you have the whole deal. But then Alter said, but the second opinion is avalat seva. The Torah doesn't care about dafkum and sevas atalas. Chen halacha, fine. But the first opinion, the Rambam holds that it has to mamash be the color. So according to the Rambam, if you have a white garment, you can't just say, I'll make more of the strings tchelis because it doesn't hurt. It does hurt. If you only need one of the 8 to be tchelis, you can't color anymore because then you have strings which are not the same color as the talis. So according to the Rambam, you have to have 1 and 1 string only tchelis. According to the Raavad, 2. According to the Rambam, if you have 2, you have a major problem with your tzitzis because the second one is a problem. The second one is meant to be lavan, the same color as your beged. That's the first Yesher Ibn Al-Tzeba says number 7. Yeah. So, by the way, when Kairach said, Moshe, if the whole talus is tchelis, right?
Look at now.
Right, but it doesn't help itself, but a couple strings help. How many strings did Kairach mention? In one place in Medrash, does Kairach mention 4 strings? And 4 strings helps? Does that sound like he's going like Rashi and Taisus, on each corner you need 4? Or is going like the Rambam? 1 string for each corner equals 4 altogether. So the Radzina discusses all this because he wants to try. He believes the Rambam. The Radzina believes the Rambam's right. Only one of the 8. But the Raavad says 2. Rashi Taisus says 4. So in other words, what the Chilazon is, who knows what it is? B'chlal, the color of tchelis, we started off, some say it's turquoise, greenish, bluish, purplish. How you make it was a big machlekes. It's a big machlekes of how you're going to dye it. It's so not posher to do the thing of tchelis. But the Radziner says, listen, that's not an excuse because you're not sure who the halach is like, you throw the mitzvah out of the window. Who ever heard of such a thing? So you know what? I'm going to finish with this. I'm going to finish with the following point. A lot more to talk about, but this is the following lomdus, which to me is mamish gevaldik. I'm going to do this quick. The Radziner's main taina was that, can you disprove that what I found is Chilazon? You can't say for sure. So maybe it is. You have an opportunity to do a mitzvah saseh min Torah. Don't we always say that any suffix in the Torah, you always have to be machmir? If you're not sure if you said Shema or not, you have to repeat it. Any suffix min Torah, you have to be machmir. So right now you don't have tchelis. The Eibishter screams in the Chumash where tchelis. According to Rabbi Meir, the tchelis is what reminds you of the Eibishter. In fact, when the Torah says or the Isem Oisi, you should see it. Right? And you remember the mitzvahs of Hashem. What does Oisai mean? The tzitzis. Tzitzis is plural. You should say Oisam. So the Gemara says it means you'll see the Eibishter. The Ramban says it's Oisai because it's not talking about the white strings, it's the blue string. The tchelis. And the tchelis is the ikir of the mitzvah. The tchelis reminds you uschartem, like Rab Meir says. The tchelis is what sends the whole thing to the kisei hakovet. So the Radziner says tchelis is the ikir of the mitzvah. It might be. Why wouldn't you put it on? That was his big taina, and he traveled to the Yeshua Lev of Kutna, the Yeshua Smalkoi, and the Yeshua Smalkoi. He didn't buy into the arguments of the Radziner except for this one. He said, you know what? Taka, what does a person have to lose? What does a person have to lose? Put on the tchelis. You have the problem with the Rambam, number 7, the Rambam, right? Because if it's not tchelis, then your strings are not going to be the same color as your beged. But we just saw in number 7, the Alter Rebbe says the halacha follows the other opinions that the color doesn't really matter. So what do you have to lose? So you have the Gemara in Bava Metzia that if you're wearing false chelis, the Eibishter says, Okay, but that's talking about somebody. If someone's able to get real chelis, but they don't want to spend the money, so they get a fake fake chelis from a plant, right? They get a fake, not synthetic, from a plant. Hold on. So the Eibishter says, you think you fool everyone? You don't fool me. But if you don't have the mitzvah, you're trying your best. Obviously, that Gemara wouldn't apply. So what do you have to lose?
So everything they said is a nignaz. Everybody got time to come with a new thing. Oh, here we go. Like the
So we said that some forms say nignaz means nishkach. It was nignaz meitanu meetzleinu. Anachnu lo yodim. But if somebody finds out and somebody realizes and does research, we always have an idea. Mokem hinichul li'avoseinu liskadaboy. We always say that sometimes, for generations no one knew, and then boom, one guy comes and this was the Eibusha gave him this outlet, this chus. You should never say that no one did it until now. No, that's not the outlook a Jew should have. If something needs to be done, you do it. Until now wasn't done. That's not your cheshbon. Maybe this is why God put you on the world. This is my thing.
The same thing with the Aaron, with the Mishkan, all the tools that was.
No, because what are we going to do with them? What are we going to do with them? Here you have a mitzvah in Torah. It's a regular mitzvah like any mitzvah. A mitzvah saseh, you have to spend a fifth of your money. So here's the thing. So he came, and we're going to finish with this. The Radziner then came to the Beis Halevi, Reb Chaim Briska's father, Yasher Ber Soloveitchik, Yosef Besar, who was a brilliant scholar in the times of the Tzemach Tzedek Reb Marash. And first of all, he said like this. He said, don't you know the Ur HaChaim in this week's Parsha? Va'asu lehem tzitzis al kanfei vigdeim l'doiroisam, for generations. And then it says, v'nosnu al tzitzis hakonav psil tchelis. L'doiroisam is said before the word of tchelis. Why? So the Ur HaChaim and the Alshich, they say, because the tchelis is not l'doiroisam. The love on the wide strings are forever. The tchelis is not forever. The tchelis is not for all time. The pasuk itself is hinting that there's going to come a time that tchelis won't be extant. So the Radzina said, well, that's the halachic argument. You have savort in a pasuk. The Radzina will say, what do you mean? Even if I bring it back, the fact is for 1,000 years no one had it. So that's the l'doraisam. For a couple of generations they didn't have it. Doesn't mean you can never have it till Mashiach comes. Who said that's the pshat in the pasuk? Maybe the pasuk, the remez is the pasuk is foretelling that there's going to be a gap of 1,000 years of no tchelis, but who said it can't come back? But then the Beis Halevi says the following. This is the real lumdus. I'm going to do this quickly. When do we say that a mitzvah in Torah you have to be machmir? If you don't know if you said Shema, or if you don't know if you benched or not, or if you don't know if you did any mitzvah in Torah, 50-50. Maybe you did it, maybe you didn't. So you have to be machmir and do it. Because when you're machmir and you do it, you'll know for sure that you did it. You'll be able to take it to the bank. You're going from 50 to 100, let's say. Right now you're 50-50. Do it again and you'll be sure. But let's say you're holding 0 and you're able to get from 0 to 50. In other words, right now you have no mitzvah. You have a shofar in front of you and it's mamash of 50-50 if it's kosher or not. Do you have to be machmir and do it? In other words, we hold like this. We hold that any sofek min Torah you have to be machmir. And according to most Rishonim, that itself is biblical. Most Rishonim hold if you have a piece of meat in front of you and you don't know if it's pig or kosher, min Torah you're not allowed to eat it. The Rambam is one of the Rambam, the Rav, a couple people hold that min Torah you could. It's the Chachomim that said that any sfeika deraisa you have to be machmir. Comes Rabbi Akiva Eiger and says the Rambam's only talking about prohibitions, but a mitzvah saseh, the Rambam would agree that if you have a suffix, biblically you have to be machmir. Rabbi Akiva Eiger is a tshuva, and others learn like that as well. So in other words, when it comes to mitzvah saseh, everyone agrees that if you're not sure if you did the mitzvah, biblically you have to be machmir and do it again. But says the Beis Halevi, well, that's when you're going from 50 to 100, not from 0 to 50. From 0 to 50 you don't have to. And he brings a raya from the Magen Avraham. The Magen Avraham paskins by Birchas Hamazon. There's brach of Hazon, there's the brach of Noidin Alakol, and the brach of Rachim. If you only, Adov Metiv is Rabbanon, right? But the first 3, what if you only know one of them? What if you punct, you only know one out of the 3? Should you say it? So there's a machloikus in the Rishonim if the 3 brachas are standalone or they're ma'akiv each other. Do they hold back? So the Magen Avraham says that if you're not sure, Bechal, if you're not sure if you benched, you have to be machmir and bench again, because it's a mitzvah min HaTorah. It's going from 50 to 100. But if you ate a meal, you're chayiv to bench. But all you know is one bracha, and if you're going to make the bracha, you may not be yaitze. Because some Rishonim hold all three brachas as one package deal, others hold each one as separate. The Magen Avraham says don't make the bracha. Because you don't have to, and once you don't have to, it's stam a bracha levatah. Why don't you have to? Because going 0 to 50 is not considered sveika deraisa to be machmer. So if you look at that, so if you look in number 8, look on the next page, number 8. I'm not going to do it inside, but the great Gaon Menachem Zembe. Menachem Zembe was a great, one of the greatest minds before the Holocaust. In fact, the Rogatchover once traveled to Poland, and people spent the whole day going past him, asking him questions, and he had no time for anyone. Menachem Zembe came, and he asked a kasha. Menachem Zembe was much younger. He asked a kasha to the Rogatchover, and the Rogatchover threw out an answer. Menachem Zembe asked again. The Rogatchover threw out another answer. Menachem Zembe went again, and now the Rogatchover was silent. And he waited, and he commented, the Polish fragt etwas. The Polish is onto something, he's asking something. He didn't have an answer. They didn't see each other for 25 years, until the Rogatchover was unfortunately in his last stretch of his life, very unwell. The Rogatchover had horrible head pains for a long time. The Rogatchover once said, Eibishter, at least one day a week take away my headache. At least one day a week take away my headache. The Chidah brings in Midbar Kedemus that every person has one day a week, which is their day to be Masliach. It's interesting. So the Rogatchover was heard that Eibish at least one day, give him one day a week without a headache. He was very ill. He was taken to doctors in Poland, and Yidden wanted to visit. The doctors didn't allow. Menachem Zembe wanted to visit, and the Rogatchover told the doctor to let him in. Menachem Zembe walks in the room before he says anything. The Rogatchover sits up and he says, about the question that you asked, and he gave his answer. 25 years later. Yeah. The Rebbe met Menachem Zembe right by the wedding, the night before the wedding, and there's a whole story with the fifth lichtel, which did or didn't happen. Anyhow, Akoponim.
What happened to him in the Holocaust?
Menachem Zembe was murdered in the Warsaw Ghetto, 1944. He had a son named Moshe Yehuda Aryeh Leib, who was mamish a prodigy. Died when he was 19.
Prodigy, what is it?
Go on, Ilui. Ilui. Yeah, the Pele. He passed away when he was 19 years old, and his father was a young man too. His father wasn't that old. His father then printed a sefer, a correspondence between him and his son, called Gur Aryeh Yehuda. And in number 8, I have the letter. I actually don't have the sefer. The letter that the son wrote to the father, and Menachem Zembe's response. So the son is a teenager. The son says in number 8, I saw b'shem goin echad. I saw in the name of a certain goin, and I believe this is the Beis Halevi. And the Beis Halevi says that he brings a svara by Sofek Mitzvah, that only if you're going from 50 to 100, when you finish, you know that the deal is done. But if you're going from 0 to 50, that means even after you do what you're going to do, you're still not sure if you're a Yaitse, we don't apply it. And he brings the raya from the Magen Avraham by Birchas Hamazon with the one bracha. If you only know one, since it's a debate if you're going to be Yaitse, don't say it. The Evan Ha'ozer disagrees and says, what do you mean? There were Achronim who didn't like this Magen Avraham. There were some other Rabbonim who said, what's the difference 50 to 100 or 0 to 50? Just like you have to bench again from 50 to 100, so to 0 to 50. But he brings a Prima Godim. This is all in number 8. He says, Ulama Prima Godim Shomach. He quotes the Prima Godim. The Prima Godim says no. The Prima Godim clearly delineates and makes this distinction that only by 50 to 100, when you know at the end, you're going to be finished. But from 0 to 50, where even after you do what you're going to do, you still don't know if you're a Yaitse, you don't have to be Machmer and do the action. Number 9 is part of the father's response. The child, Nebuch, this Yehuda Aryeh Leib, who died young, his letter to his father is a short letter. His father wrote a 20-page letter full of deep pulpulim, dealing with his son's question. And look at number 9. This is a cute raya that Menachem Zembe, the great Gaon Menachem Zembe. Va'ayin ba'akdama shel Rav HaMagi. Look at this. This is very cute. Says Menachem Zembe in the beginning of the Rambam's halachas for chometz or matzah. Kosav Tom. He gives a reason. L'siddur Rambam's why the Rambam writes dinei chometz koydem achilas matzah. The Rambam in the laws of Pesach first speaks about chometz, then matzah. Why? Because chronologically, because achilas matzah, eating matzah and telling to Mitzrayim, lesnu bein hashmoshes. They don't exist bein hashmoshes of the night of the 15th, because it's a suffix if it's day or night. Those mitzvahs only begin at night mamish. But the isra of eating chometz and owning chometz, that starts even bein hashmoshes. So fragt Menachem Zembe, wait a second. They should both start bein hashmoshes. If you have a chiyuv to go from 0 to 50, then you have a chiyuv to eat matzah bein hashmoshes, because right now you haven't eaten, and if you eat it, 50% chance you'll be yaitze. Just like you can't eat chometz 50-50, you should have to eat matzah 50-50. Must be, you see from here, that if after eating the matzah you're only going to be 50% chance yaitze, then you don't have to do it. This is actually a very cute raya that he brings. And then in number 10, he brings two logics for this. Why would taka this din be that from 0 to 50 you don't have to go? Because this was really the crux of the debate. Because the Radzina pushed that Sfeika Deraisa L'Chumra is equally from 50 to 100 and 0 to 50. And the Beis HaLevi wanted to disagree. And in fact, in this tshuva, Menachem Zembe makes mention of the Radzina. He makes mention clearly. So this is really the crux of the issue. Menachem Zembe gives two reasons why he thinks the Beis HaLevi's logic makes sense. One reason is that when you go from 0 to 50, right, once you reach 50, you still have a chiv minat Torah to go from 50 to 100. That's the classic Sfeika D'Oraisa L'Chumra, right? Usually Sfeika D'Oraisa is when you're not sure, did I say Shema or not, so now be machmir and do it again. So if you're on 0, it doesn't make sense that minat Torah you're going to have to go to 50, and then minat Torah you haven't done anything because you still have to go from 50 to 100. If you're still going to be, if the chiv is still going to be on your head after you do the action, that means the action is not being moitzi your chiyuv. So then you can't be mechuyev to do it. You hear the logic? If after you're going to go from 0 to 50, you're chuyev minat Torah to go from 50 to 100, that means your action is not going to be moitzi your obligation. So how could you be chayav to do something which is not going to be moitzi your obligation? Well, there's two different obligations. You'll be moitzi your obligations of 50, but that doesn't make sense. A mitzvah is one obligation. There aren't two different obligations. What?
You'll still be 50%. You'll still be chayav.
Exactly, and that's the real Sfeika D'Oraisa. In other words, you're going to be doing something, but then you're minat Torah, you're still chayav to do the mitzvah.
You're doing something that you're going to put yourself into a Sfeika D'Oraisa.
Well, you're already there, but
You're right.
you weren't yaitz anything.
Right, you won't be yaitza because the Eibush is still waiting for the mitzvah. In other words, exactly. God's still waiting for the mitzvah. That means he didn't do anything. The other logic, he says, and the other logic, he says that there are certain things in Torah that only exist as a definite. They don't exist as a suffix. They only exist as something definite. The Rebbe speaks about this a number of times. Certain things that only exist as a definite. And for example, Sfiras HaOmer, the Rebbe mentions an idea that if you're not sure what the day is, so maybe count yesterday and today. And so you'll be yaitza because counting means you know exactly what you're counting. If you count something and then at the end you still don't know what the correct number is, it's not a suffix counting. Maybe I counted. You can't. Counting has to be definite. That's what it means. Certain things don't exist as a suffix. So Menachem Zembe is over here that when it comes to mitzvahs, the Eibishter only speaks in the definite term. The Eibishter speaks when the Eibishter says, I want you to bench, what he means is, I want you to do a full-fledged Birchas Hamazon. That's what Birchas Hamazon means. B'chlal, when the Eibishter demands a mitzvah, God always speaks in definite terms. And therefore, if what you're going to do is a suffix, right, it's nothing. It's not what the Eibishter asks you to do. It's an interesting idea. He says, if you're doing a suffix mitzvah, it's bavada, you're not yoytze. If you do a suffix mitzvah, it doesn't count. That's not what the Eibishter speaks of definite existences. An action has to be certain and definite. If it's only a suffix, it's b'chlal not what the Eibishter asks you to do, and it counts for nothing. So these are two logics that then he gives nafkaminas, and it's fascinating. So Akaponim, this is really at the crux of the issue. The Radziner very much pushed 0 to 50 is like 50 to 100. And therefore, if you're not sure if this is Chilazon or not, what do you have to lose? You have the Rambam that, if it's not Chilazon, then your white strings are not the same color as your beged. Ein halacha ka Rambam. We saw that in Alter Rebbe number 7. Although the Alter Rebbe says to me, Alter Rebbe, that's why we take away a white talis cotton. And that's why you make sure the strings are white and not orange, to be machmir like the Rambam. But it's just a chumrah. L'chayra, the possibility of getting tchelis is much more important. It's much more important. But the Beis Halevi would say no. That going from 0 to 50, and B'chlal, but it's probably not even 0 to 50. There's so many shilas on the Radzinus Chilazon, it's like going from 0 to 10 maybe. You're B'chlal not mechuyev to do it. And then fakert, maybe the Rambam's issue is a greater issue. The Rambam's, if you're walking around with the wrong color, and that means your love on strings aren't the same color as you, maybe that's a bigger issue. Anyhow, so I think it's fascinating how it boils down to this. Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that we haven't seen yet. Anyhow, we'll end our discussion over here.
1 second. So anyone who wears Chilazon today?
So apparently, hold, wait. There are two legends. Apparently, Reb Nachman of Breslov said that in the year Terachim, which is 1888, Tchelis will return. 1887 and 1888 is when the Radziner worked on this. He starts 1887. In 1888, well, maybe he was waiting. Nachman said 1888.
What year did he say that?
Before he passed away.
But the Breslov
decades
that
before.
today
No, so the Breslov, that's why Breslov wear Tchelis today.
What chelet is that? That's not the Chilazon, obviously.
They're wearing
No.
They were
So
in their
Tchelis today, we don't wear the Radziners. They don't wear the Radziners. Because Rabbi Herzog, the chief rabbi of Eretz Yisrael, when he was in college in the early 1900s, he wrote a big doctorate all about the Tchelis. He feels that the Radziner, he has an issue with the Radziners, because apparently the Radziners Tchelis only turn the right blue color when you mix other things into it.
Which is like
Which is like Tosfos, but who said it's the same Samamonim that the Gemara is talking about?
That's what only the...
But Rabbi Herzog said he thinks that the Radziner was a greater scientist than the scientist. He says the scientist had to mix other things. He thinks the Radziner might have gotten it right to get straight. But Herzog found a different fish that he felt, something else that he felt was the Chilazon, and he pushed it. But in the end, he was chayzer because he felt that his color also wasn't the perfect color. Later on, scientists found that if you take Rabbi Herzog's the color and you leave it in the sun for a little bit, it turns into the right color. So apparently that's what they wear, that's what many people wear today. Not the Radziners, but whatever it was Rabbi Herzog found. They're not the Radziners' Chelis, it's Rabbi Herzog's Chelis. Apparently the Baal Shem Tov said, apparently the legend of Baal Shem Tov said that before Mashiach comes, Tchelis will return. So maybe Tchelis has returned enough to fulfill that.
Also some place archaeologists found in some place in Syria or something, a bunch of shells from some type of snail.
Yeah, Port Viafa.
Whatever. There's a whole...
Right, because there's a Medrash Rabbah that says the Chilazon also has a shell. The Shals, what does that shell mean? Yeah. Shals, what does the shell mean? The shell grows with the shells. And no. So it's true. Our Brisa might argue on that medrash. Our Brisa that doesn't mention the shell might argue on the medrash about the shell.
What about that guy who used to wear 70 or 150 pairs of scissors?